The House will now have under consideration House Bill number 658. The gentleman from 10.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask unanimous consent to dispense with reading of House Bill 658.
Without objection, the gentleman has the floor to open the debate.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It has long been the policy of the state of Idaho, it's even enshrined in our Constitution, that in certain heinous situations, the death penalty is an appropriate penalty to impose. We take that very seriously. We take that somberly. We, as a legislature, define what is available to be imposed as a sentence. We rely on the executive branch in all its forms, at all levels, to enforce the law. We rely on the judiciary to impose sentence, except in this case, where death penalty cannot be imposed by a judge. It can only be imposed by a jury of citizens sitting in their role as citizens. It is therefore our obligation to make available the practical means to do the will of the people of Idaho in carrying out the sentence that we as a legislature have stated is our policy. There is a problem, however, and that is that where courts won't overturn the death penalty and legislatures will not repeal it, a new strategy has emerged in fighting the death penalty, and that is to name and shame the providers and the participants in that process. In 2015, the state of Texas went through this. They know more about capital punishment than we do. But everyone on the list of those involved in administering the death penalty was relentlessly harassed. Clear down to the laboratory technicians that tested the lethal injection drugs for their composition and their quality. The Department of Correction has informed us that there is no supplier. They can find no supplier to supply the lethal injection drugs to carry out an execution unless we have protections for their identity, specifically because of this approach of using naming and shaming to functionally repeal the death penalty where it can't be accomplished legally or politically. You all should have a graphic that I pulled off of NCSL that demonstrates that there are, I believe, 27 states where the death penalty is still on the books. And you have a list of 19 states. 19 of those 27 have shield laws in some form similar to this one. So a supermajority of the states that carry this out have this particular type of law. As a functional matter, a no vote on this ends the death penalty in Idaho. Only firing squad and lethal injection are in our Constitution as appropriate means of execution. Firing squad, in theory, could be brought back, but our current protocols are the result of years and years of litigation on both state and federal questions, and we are in a place where our procedures are absolutely defensible. And we would have to start back at square one if we did want to bring back the firing squad. And frankly, the Department of Correction that we turn to, not to decide on any sentence, but to enforce every sentence that we as the legislature say they must, isn't at all eager to participate in the current protocols, let alone the more gruesome process of a firing squad. I believe that the death penalty should be available. I believe that we should not be casting a vote to end it. I believe we should be cautious and sober in our administration of it, but there are circumstances and crimes so heinous that it should be imposed. A few things that this bill does not do. This bill does not prevent the disclosure of the qualifications of those involved in the execution process. It only prevents the disclosure of the identity. So the public and the accused have full access to know what the qualifications and ability of the team to carry out the execution are. It does not conceal the results of any laboratory test. And let me explain. Anytime lethal injection drugs are obtained, and the procedures and protocols are clearly laid out in IDOC IDAPA rules, very transparent for anybody to see. Anytime these chemicals are obtained, they are then tested by an independent laboratory to make sure they are what they say they are and what the quality and sort that it's supposed to be. That's a safety protocol for the Eighth Amendment. It does not prevent the disclosure of the results of that testing. It only prevents the disclosure of the identity of the laboratory that did the testing. It does not prevent the accused from seeking to have an independent evaluation of its own, his or her own, conducted by a different laboratory. It does not prevent the disclosure of the history or the non-identifiable traits of anybody else involved in the execution team. So the protocols are transparent. The chemicals are transparent. The qualifications of those involved are transparent. But as they say on TV, the names have been redacted or changed to protect the innocent. This is not a new concept. We've all seen at some point a medieval executioner portrayed with a black hood over his head, because nobody wants to go look their fellow citizens in the eyes having done this. We don't revel in administering this punishment. But this sentence for the victims and the victims' families is appropriate, and as a practical matter, this is 100% necessary in order to carry it out. And I would urge your green vote.
Is there further debate? Gentleman from 16.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To debate against this bill, I think all of us have a threshold of activities that we're comfortable our government participating in. I trust the government to pick up my trash on time. I do not trust them to kill people using secret means, methods, practices, and chemicals. And to do that in a constitutional manner, I just don't trust them to do that. Another issue that I have with the bill is that it exempts manufacturers from the disclosure laws. This is a violation of their right to contract. 60 corporations that supply these drugs have entered into non-binding contracts or binding contracts with their with the other companies that supply these drugs, saying that they do not want their drugs used for lethal injection. But under this law, those if drugs are being supplied, those would be non-discoverable, so they can no longer enforce those contracts. Corporations have a right not to involve themselves in these processes, and now they will have no idea if they are actually supplying these drugs to the suppliers or not. So with that, I'd ask for your red light. The government shouldn't have the right to kill people using secret means, methods, and practices.
Is there further debate? Gentleman from F4.
For a question of the sponsor, please.
Gentleman from 10 yield.
Gentleman yields.
Gentleman yields.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, I am certainly agree with not disclosing the name of the person to the general public for fear of retribution. I understand that. A concern I have, and hopefully you can explain, is that in part of the bill it talks about on page, well, the first page at the bottom, shall not be subject to disclosure, shall not be admissible as evidence or discoverable in any proceeding before any court, tribunal, board, and agency in person. And again, not being a lawyer, I'm concerned that if someone involved in this, for whatever reason, on purpose, is negligent, on purpose creates an action that is against the law, does that make this person not liable for what they've done?
Gentleman from 10.
Mr. Speaker, good gentleman.
Good gentleman, you need to remain standing as he answers your question.
Mr. Speaker, good gentleman, if there's something that is done negligently during the course of a state anything, it's the state that's liable. And so the state would be liable whether you know the identity of that person or not, and it would be the state that would be writing the check whether you know the identity of that person or not. Again, that person's qualifications to have been there in the first place are fully discoverable, but it changes nothing as it relates to liability for something gone awry.
Just follow up.
Will the gentleman yield to another question?
Gentleman yields.
Gentleman yields.
So what you're saying is if an individual did something, the state would step in and the state would be the prosecutable party and not the individual who did something.
Gentleman from 10.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good gentleman, that is exactly what I'm saying. This is a state action, and so anybody who the state employs to carry out that action is doing so in the name of the state. It's not the individual doing it anymore. It is the state of Idaho.
Is there further debate? Hearing none, will the gentleman please stand and close the debate?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to clarify these aren't secret chemicals or secret methods. The methodology is spelled out in painful detail in IDOC IDAPA. And again, the composition of those chemicals is always tested, and those results are available, and the accused has the right to ask for enough to have another laboratory tested as well. So the chemicals and the processes are anything but secret, even if this bill passes. I ask your green light.
Thank you. Debate is closed. The question before the House is, shall House Bill number 658 pass the House? The clerk will unlock the machine and the members will record their votes. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change his vote? Clerk will lock the machine and record the vote. The vote count shows 38 in favor with 30 against and 2 absent. House Bill number 658 has passed the House and will be transmitted to the Senate.